Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ryan Barnett. I'm with Barnett Group LLC. It is the parent company to IND Capital Holdings, investing in debt. Me and Wesley Wells have a local note closers group, Memphis Note Closers Group, and also a podcast that's just called the Profits and Real Estate Podcast Show. And today I have Alan Johnson, and he is with New Direction IRA. For self-directed IRAs, and we're just going to run through a presentation and ask some questions. And if you have any questions in the future at all, post it below in YouTube or any other platform that you're seeing this on, Facebook, and I'll respond. I respond to every question. I may have to reach out to Alan, or you can reach out to Alan. He's an IRA custodian. If you have a self-directed IRA, such as not with Vanguard or any other Fidelity, if you have and want control over your investments that are for your retirement, then you would get a self-directed IRA that you can invest in a number of things. I think this isn't financial advice. I'm no way a financial planner other than planning for my family's financial security future. You can invest in gold if you want to. But I stick to, I'm getting into some commercial notes, seconds, I call them. They're junior liens, but strictly for the most part, first and second notes, which are similar to a bank, but you don't lend money, although you can private lend money out of your IRA as well. But that's what we're talking about is self-directed IRA, and I'll let Alan take it over with his presentation. And give you some ins and outs, and just ask any questions if you have any in the post below on whatever platform you're seeing this on, and I will get back to you and answer the best that I can for you. You doing okay? Sorry to if you guys have watched anything from me at all, I can ramble on and sometimes get way off topic. So it's a personality defect that I haven't been able to correct. But you doing okay, Alan, today?
Yeah. In fact, I think you pretty much gave my presentation. So, but yeah, thanks, Ryan. As you pointed out, there are a lot of things, and we'll get into this in a little bit in the slideshow. But there's a lot of things you can invest in with your IRA. Tonight, I want to focus more on the note investing, as I'm assuming that's what's primarily of interest to the Memphis Note Closers Group. So by way of background, again, my name is Alan Johnson. I am a business development manager located in New Jersey. I cover the Northeast region for New Direction IRA. New Direction itself is headquartered outside of Denver, Colorado. And I pretty much cover the East Coast, where mostly my job function amounts to providing educational, informational types of presentations and personal private consultations about what can or cannot be done with your IRA. So before we get too far into this, as Ryan mentioned earlier, I want to just kind of throw up what the usual slide about disclaiming any real responsibility for what we say here tonight. We're a provider of self-directed IRA accounts, and what that means is we basically provide bookkeeping and administrative services for people that want to self-direct their IRA. Bullet point 2 here is important. We don't provide investment advice. We don't endorse any products. Basically, we're not going to be the agent for any investment provider or investment holder. Our role in life is to simply do what you tell us, provided that what you tell us is not inconsistent with IRS regulations. So let's talk a little bit more about this self-directed title, self-directed IRA. Strictly speaking, you could say all IRA accounts are self-directed. I get phone calls all the time, and I say, well, I already have a self-directed IRA. And I say, well, who's it with? Well, it's with E-Trade. And I buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds with that. And that is correct. You are self-directing it if you're making those decisions yourself. But even if you have a financial advisor making those decisions, you are directing that advisor to do that on your behalf. So self-directed IRAs, it's an industry term. It's come to mean IRAs that are invested in something other than stocks, bonds, mutual funds. So you can self-direct a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA. If you inherit an IRA from a family member or somebody else, that can be self-directed. And there are a couple of employer type plans, most notably the SEP IRA and the Simple IRA, which can be established if you're a small business owner and want to give yourself and your employees the benefit of a company-sponsored IRA plan. So when you fill out the application form, people oftentimes call me and say, Alan, I don't see self-directed on any of these choices. They can all be self-directed. And I just wanted to kind of point that out before we got too much further. Tonight, I want to really talk about 4 different areas. We'll basically go through the IRS regulations regarding what an IRA can or cannot do. We'll go through the process of setting up an IRA, moving funds into it, and directing the custodian to make an investment on behalf of that IRA. And we'll talk about a few things that are kind of specific to notes, things you ought to consider, think about, if you're wanting to take your IRA and invest it in notes. And we'll wrap it up with something that I call what you don't know. I have to chuckle sometimes. I get phone calls, and after about a 45-minute phone call with people, sometimes they'll say, well, gee, Alan, this was great. You really taught me a lot of stuff. Is there anything here I ought to know that you haven't covered already? And that's kind of hard to answer sometimes because none of us know what we don't know. And but there's a few things here that I'll close with that might be kind of interesting from the standpoint of things that you might not have thought of that maybe you should think about. So let's get started.
It'll absolutely, that's the thing. You have to, it was, I think, a Bruce Lee quote, be like water, just kind of liquid, because things are always changing, no matter who's president, no matter who's in your government, anywhere, everything is just always changing. So you just have to change with the times and roll with the punches. But Alan, I don't want to sidetrack, but that's interesting. So I'm an employer, 7 employees, and that's the thing about the not. So you have to, like on the SEP, you have to, whether Joe and Bob can, you have to pay the same amount. So these can be, that's interesting. I need to find out more about that for a company, not the note business, but for another business, that those can be self-directed IRA related to notes. So like if we were to, and it's something I may shy away from because, you have to contribute the same amount. And with notes, I don't know how you would do that. If it would just be a comparable note amount, maybe unpaid principal balance or what, because, we're purchasing non-performing notes. So both of them could do a return of something completely different, so I may dig myself into a bad situation if I self-direct my employees / team workers, self-directed simple IRA.
Well, sure. You can set up these employer plans at a brokerage firm, and you could allow your employees, you could set aside, and it doesn't have to be a lot. The advantage of the SEP and the Simple is that you can set aside large amounts of money, typically more than somebody can put into a traditional or Roth IRA if they fund it personally. But as you point out, you got to treat all your employees the same. If you're going to set aside 10% of your income into your SEP IRA, then every employee's got to have 10%. You're going to have to contribute from the profits of the business into that SEP IRA. And sure, and you can set these up. Typically, they're set up so that you can buy stocks, bonds, mutual funds. The only difference here is that if you or your employees want to take the money that's been contributed to that SEP and self-directed into an investment, you can do that. And it's not like all your employees are going to have to invest in notes. They can invest in what they want. And they can even set up their own traditional IRA account and move money from their SEP into the traditional. And they can self-direct that traditional, or they could just put it in the stocks, bonds, mutual funds, or the like. So there's really, the slide is intended to point out that SEP IRA can invest in non-traditional assets, but setting it up can be a little bit tricky because, as you pointed out, you do want to make sure that you're treating all your employees fairly.
Something to run by your IRA custodian, accountant, and lawyer.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you gotta get the lawyers involved. And a CPA. If you have a CPA that's
Yes,
helping,
yes, absolutely.
they can talk you through all this as well. So let's get into the IRS regulations. And essentially, there's three different categories that these fall under. Investment types that are not permitted, something known as disqualified persons, and then prohibited transactions, which cannot be conducted with disqualified persons. We'll touch on all three of these. But first, let's talk about the investment types that are not permitted. It's actually a pretty limited set of restricted investments. You cannot use your IRA to invest in insurance on yourself. You cannot use your IRA to invest in collectibles. So if you want to buy wine collections, rare coins, stamps, jewelry, antiques, Persian rugs, all of that, rare automobiles, classic automobiles, all of that's off the table. And the third thing that you can't do is invest into an S corporation. This is not so much a restriction on a retirement plan as much as it is a restriction in terms of the way S corporations are defined. Unlike LLCs, limited partnerships, and C corporations, the regulations around forming an S corporation specifically state that an IRA account cannot be a shareholder. So this is why you cannot take your IRA and invest it into an S corporation. Aside from these three things, everything else is fair game, provided you don't violate any of the other restrictions that come down to disqualified persons and some of the transactions with disqualified persons that we'll get into later. So in general, we see that clients invest in sort of four main areas. This is data from our own database of more than 17,000 clients, two plus billion in assets. The majority of people make real estate related investments, then precious metals. This is actually owning the physical gold bullion or gold bars if you've got a lot of money and can afford a gold bar. Certain coins that are commodity coins. They can't be rare coins, as I pointed out earlier, but they can be certain commodity metal coins that you can invest in. Private equity is the third largest category, and then private lending is the fourth. So drilling down a little bit further into that, again, there's an unlimited number of investments, but these are some of the more common types of investments. On the left side of the screen, you'll see investments that are related largely to real estate. And Brian touched on a number of these when he was during the introduction. There's tax liens, there's distressed notes. You can be the bank and invest in, well, performing notes, as well as just being the mortgage holder if you wish. And triple net lease properties. There's lots of things that can be done with real estate. On the right side of the screen, we have sort of the loans, the private equity at the top, and then as you get down to the bottom, you see the gold bullion, the rounds, allowable coins. And way at the bottom, most recently, there's been interest in cryptocurrencies, but more than just the cryptocurrencies, the whole concept of these blockchain ICOs. Now, we're not going to talk about that. That gets rather complicated. We want to focus here mostly on the left side and specifically on mortgage note investing with an IRA. So you
can do that, huh? That is in self-directed IRAs now, cryptocurrency.
Yes, it looks a lot like investing in precious metals.
Gotcha.
A lot of the gold dealers are getting into crypto. And
gotcha. Yeah, I'll tell you what, it is and always has been a crazy world, but yeah, cryptocurrency, blockchain, it's a beast that looks like it is going to be staying. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out, but it's definitely going to play out, and I think it looks like it's here to stay. Whichever one, the blockchain, not necessarily right. The big names you heard, but
right. Yes, and there are restrictions around that. as you can imagine.
Absolutely.
And those, to get back to what you were saying earlier, those are changing all the time as well.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
It's hard to keep up with it sometimes, but we basically spend a lot of our time and resources just trying to make sure that we stay on top of these various regulations so that we don't give bad advice to any of the clients that want to custody their IRAs with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Alan told me.
oh, you had another question, Ryan?
No, no, I was making a joke that isn't funny. I was like, yeah, Alan told me that, nothing, and it ended there. So, just
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that might be a joke for you. It's not a joke for me.
no way. Yeah, you always have to.
I could do this.
I think a lot of people in real estate, but yeah, good tip to just you want to ask everyone. You want to ask people relationships that you built in the business. Everyone's going to have their own take on it, of course. I personally would say the advice that I would give, which is in no way necessarily, unless you know me for a while, would be to ask those, like we always have mentioned, the professionals that in the business or in the industry of IRA custodian, Alan, and your accountant, your CPA, and an attorney if it goes that far. If because you never know. I mean, odds are they're probably not investing in that, but I'm sure there are some that are. I know there's plenty of people investing in it, but I'm not, just so you know.
Well, just so you know, I'm not either.
Yeah.
but it is intriguing to me, especially the whole Ethereum, the whole blockchain technology.
Yeah, and how it may change the banking industry, and
Right.
whether they're getting on board or what will happen. But yeah, absolutely.
Right. But if you try to ask me what's a bargain price for Bitcoin, I have no way.
Me, same here.
If it ever drops back down to like 10 cents, I think I might buy into it just for the heck of it.
Yeah. Money that you could afford to lose. Yeah. Absolutely.
And 10 cents is about all I can afford to lose on Bitcoin. Anyway, let's move into this concept of disqualified persons. Essentially, the IRS defines certain individuals as being disqualified from conducting business with your IRA. And these people include the IRA holder and his or her spouse, also lineal family members of the IRA holder. So that means my parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, and children and grandchildren's spouses cannot invest or conduct a business transaction with my IRA. And then you get into things like a corporation or a company that's owned 50% or more by these disqualified persons can't do business with your IRA, and as well as key persons in these entities. Now, these last two, generally we don't run into a problem with them, but you start to run into problems if you start to invest your IRA in an ongoing business that you or disqualified persons are actively a part of. So if you have a parent that owns a company and you want to invest your IRA in that company and it's more than 50% owned by that parent, you're not going to be able to do it, is what this essentially is saying. Now, interestingly enough here, the siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, they're all fair game. They can conduct a business transaction with your IRA as long as they don't get into areas that amount to self-dealing, which we'll get into in a little bit on the prohibited transaction side. But siblings, yeah, you can make an investment, or they can invest with you and conduct business with your IRA account. If you have any questions about who is a disqualified person, you can always shoot me an email, shoot Ryan an email, give me a call, and I'd be happy to go through your particular situation to make sure that you're not violating any of these prohibited transactions with disqualified persons. So speaking of these prohibited transactions, what are they? This slide is intentionally a bit of an eye test. You'll see down here it refers to the tax code. It's something known as Section 4975 in the IRS tax code. I have actually put the real language there only because many times people will provide you with their interpretation of the real language. I want to get the real language out there in front of you if you ever want to take a look at it yourself, if you want to dispute what your custodian is saying. This is what the actual language says. And then I'm going to go through some examples here, hopefully relatively quickly, to kind of illustrate what each of these A, B, C, D, E, and F really are referring to. So let's start with the first one. Sale or exchange or leasing of any property between a plan and a disqualified person. Good example of this, and these are actually based on real life examples. Had a prospect called me up, said, my husband and I are buying a new home. We want to sell our existing home to our IRA and use it for rental income. Can't do that because you would be selling a property between yourself and your IRA account. That would not be allowed under A. Lending of money or other extension of credit, that's pretty straightforward. I want to use my IRA to loan money to my daughter so that she can buy a house. Nope, can't do that. Daughters, children are disqualified persons. You also cannot borrow from your IRA. That falls under item B here as well. C, furnishing of goods, services, or facilities between a plan. This one comes up a lot. Typically what it is, I'm a contractor, I rehab houses, I want to use my IRA for fix and flips. I understand I can't pay myself, which is fine, but I want to maximize the return that goes into the IRA by doing that rehab work myself. Cannot do that. That would be furnishing of goods or services to the IRA or an investment owned by the IRA, and that would be prohibited. Transfer to or use for the assets. One of the more common things here also, again, real estate related. Take my IRA, I want to buy a vacation rental property, and my family and I will stay there 1 week each year, but the rest of the time it'll be generating rental income that will accrue to the advantage of my IRA account. Sorry, can't do that because that is using personally for the benefit of the assets owned by a plan and would not be allowed under this rule. Act by a disqualified person who is a fiduciary. Fiduciary means you have a responsibility to put the interest of your IRA account ahead of your own personal interest. So here's a situation, one of my favorites on this. Guy has a vacation home at the shore. He's got an undeveloped lot across the street that has trees on it. These trees block his view of the ocean. The lot comes up for sale. Mr. Jones decides to buy it with his IRA account. Then he uses funds in his IRA to have the trees cut down. That's not allowed. He's not doing it because he's making an investment with his IRA as much as what he's doing is personally benefiting from having an unobscured view of the ocean. And that is acting in your own self-interest rather than in the interest of the IRA account. So that's not going to be allowed. You kind of see as we go down the list that E and F tend to be sort of catch-all phrases to try to catch anything that might not have been allowed under the first four. And there's this receipt of consideration. The one I like here is had a woman who was interested in purchasing a vacation rental condo. It was affiliated with a theme park, and the developer was saying, "Hey, you buy the property, we'll give you free lifetime passes to the theme park." And Paulette here said, "Well, gee, I'll buy it with the IRA and then use my and then since my IRA is the owner, I'll get these free lifetime passes and take advantage of the
That's right.
Yeah, sorry, can't do that. Now, what you could do is you could take your contract of sale, and you could put that in log ride and let it ride around in the theme park and have fun. Well, anyway, now I made a bad joke. But,
gotcha. Yeah, I was making sure. I thought so. I thought it was jokes like I made, and I was like, hold on, wait, is this serious? But okay, cleared it up.
So that covers the IRS regulations. We went briefly over the disallowed investments. We went over who is a disqualified person, and we went over prohibited transactions that cannot be done with disqualified persons. So any questions that come to mind up to this point, Ryan, or should we move right into the self-directed process?
You can keep going though. I'm good on questions, and if as any comes, since we're not live webinar, they'll be in the post, and we can answer them, or I'll reach out to you for the the question, or just I'll put both of our information up here in the chat, but I'm also going to post it below the video as well. Just name, email address, phone number, and
Right.
so they'll reach out. But no, I'm good. I'm good so far.
Okay. So let's talk about the process. As an industry, we're pretty good about getting out there on our websites, and all of us do it. Pretty much say it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. You open an account with a self-directed IRA custodian. You move funds from your current IRA account or 401k plan or what have you into the self-directed account, and then you tell the custodian to make an investment on behalf of the IRA. Easy peasy, 1, 2, 3, except that it isn't quite that easy. Opening an account really is easy. It takes less than a day. Most custodians, including ourselves, have online account opening portals where you can just type in the information, get an account open online. The funds, they're moving the funds in. That can take anywhere from 2 to 20 days, and we're talking business days here. So that could take it could take a month to get the money over. Typically, it takes about a week, but depending on the responsiveness of the current custodian, it could drag out, and we'll get into a few reasons why.
Is that initially open an account that it can take 20 days?
No, that's just to get the money from the
IRA you're in now to the new one.
Right, from the old to the new.
So not necessarily when you're wanting to fund a deal. Have you seen them take that 20 days if you're wanting to, say, buy a note? Can it take that long?
Yeah.
If they're missing.
You could open the account and have the money moved into the account before you ever go out and buy a note.
Yeah, I gotcha.
So, you open the account, you move $10,000 into the account, $100,000, whatever it is, and then you say, fine, now that I've got the money in my account, I'm going to go out and get a note. But you might run into step 3, which could be problematic, especially if you're a note buyer, because from the time you tell us you want to make an investment to the time the money actually arrives, that can take 2 to 3 days. And you may end up having issues around getting the money over to the note seller in time to take advantage of the deal, particularly if you're participating in any kind of auction scenario, or you've got any kind of a competitive environment at play where you got to act quickly to get the money over in order to get a hold of that note. There's ways around that, and we'll get into that in a little bit as well. The funding, getting the money over that 2 to 20 days, typically there really is only about 3 ways you can get the money over. You can transfer it from an IRA, you can roll it over from something like a 401k plan, or you can make your annual contribution to the IRA account. Typically, if you're looking to transfer the money, I don't want to get into this too much. It can get a little bit boring, but the point here is that you want to talk to your self-directed IRA custodian about the advisability of doing a transfer versus a rollover. These are 2 distinctly different types of operations. I have most people, and it's understandable, they'll talk about rollovers, transfers interchangeably because typically the client doesn't really know this. but they are different, and you need to be careful, and hopefully you're working with a custodian that will actually probe you a little bit to understand whether you're really talking about a transfer or a rollover. There are custodians out there where you say, I want to roll over my money. They give you instructions to do the rollover, and then something goes wrong, and the client gets upset, and the custodian says, well, you told me you wanted to roll it over. Yeah, it's kind of a shame on them as well for not really having the conversation to say, let's get this straight and make sure that we know whether this requires a transfer or a rollover. Again, talk to a good custodian about getting this done. That can often cut down that 2 to 20 day period of time by making sure that you initiate the right process ahead of time, and then you have to try to unwind or reverse anything that was done improperly.
That always solves almost every problem. Communication and clear expectations, and what exactly is a transfer? Or
yes,
you're right. You're right. They, you as always, just it's that question. Ask. The custodian should ask, like, so what are you trying to do? But myself as well. Like I'm confused. It's like, so exactly, is this the best way to do this in my IRA? Not that you're giving me financial advice, but you're giving me advice from the perspective of a IRA custodian. Like, well, you can't do that in your IRA, or, a transfer and a whatever else it may be, or two different things. So
sure.
Always ask, especially if they're not, if they're just like, okay, and unless y'all have done this same process together, multiple times, and what's going on. But
there's a bit of a catch-22, because we talk about, it's this line between providing information and providing advice. I can provide you advice on how to move money into an account, because I'm not pushing an investment, or I'm not suggesting to you that you take a risk with your money. I'm just providing you advice on the best way to get this done using the existing process.
Exactly.
But sometimes people don't want to get into the details of what a client is doing with their money, because they're afraid that the more they know and the more they talk about it, that they'll cross that line and actually give advice by accident. A lot of us, people that have been around in the industry long enough, we know when we're approaching that line and are about to cross it. We'll say, I can't really go any further than I just have, because that would constitute investment advice or legal advice or tax advice, and I can't really.
Absolutely.
So let's look at a little bit about funding the investment, and more specifically from the standpoint of a note. A lot of people don't understand that the IRA account itself owns the investment. So this means that the note holder is not going to be Ryan Barnett individually. What it's going to be is it's going to be the custodian for benefit of, which is what FBO stands for, a particular client's IRA account. So if you went out and got a note, you held it directly in your account, the note holder would be New Direction IRA Incorporated for benefit of Ryan Barnett IRA. And as such, if the note was performing, or you negotiated and you started to get a performing note and these payments were coming in, the check would be written to New Direction IRA, and the proceeds would be invested, or would be placed into or deposited into your IRA account. And this also means that the IRA provider, or the custodian, must execute all the investment documents. That means we sign off on that note. You tell us to sign it, and we will sign it on behalf of your IRA. This means you cannot sign as note purchaser yourself. You can only approve the purchase of it and send that document to us to sign. Note that our signature doesn't mean that we're approving of the investment. It only means that we have looked at your particular circumstances and have satisfied ourselves that going into the deal, this would not be a prohibited transaction, and therefore we will execute or sign off on that investment on behalf of your IRA. If you do something later on that violates any of the prohibited transaction rules, that's kind of on you. because all we can do is say at the time you made the investment, we do not see any Section 4975 issues that would preclude you from doing so. So we'll execute the note and we'll buy the note, take the money out of your account, and purchase it. So what does this look like, more specifically? And let's get a little bit into the fees. Fees are always something that come up. This is a fee structure, and I will say that fees are mostly the same. There are some companies out there that charge a little bit more for a transaction or a little bit less for an annual fee, but basically the cost of an IRA is going to be about the same depending, across all the custodians out there. So let's look at a situation here where somebody buys a piece of property. They want to buy a rental income house on Cherry Street. They direct us to purchase it. When we buy the property, there'll be a $95 fee charge. That's a transaction fee. We review the documents. We sign off on the purchase and sale agreement. We execute all the documents on behalf of the IRA. Once the asset is purchased, we're going to charge a per asset record-keeping fee that amounts to $295 a year. Down the road, 5, 3, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is that you sell 100 Cherry Street, we're going to charge you $95 to get the transaction off our books, liquidated to cash. So that would be what you would look at. Now, in a situation where you might want to get into several investments, maybe you buy the real estate, you also loan some money to somebody, and maybe you decide to buy a 10% ownership position in your friend's construction company. It's important to realize that as you add assets, you're going to be paying more in the way of fees. And so when you look at this all in, holding these 3 assets, as long as those 3 assets are active in the account, you're looking at 3 times $295 a year. You're looking at about $1,000 a year worth of administrative fees that you're paying to the custodian. One of the ways that people can get around these fees is to actually invest in something that's commonly known as a checkbook IRA. What we do with the checkbook IRA is that the account holder, in this case John Doe, would form an LLC in the state of his choosing, using the advice of a lawyer or an attorney that's familiar with various state laws and regulations on establishing an LLC, but basically working with a lawyer to set up an LLC, and then you tell us to invest your IRA money into that company, into that LLC that you've created. The $95 to purchase the interest in the LLC, buy your IRA account, $295 per year as long as that LLC is in place. And then down the road, 15, 20 years, when you want to disband the LLC and sell it out, $95 to get out of the transaction. But notice that the LLC can then purchase entities or investments in the name of that LLC without having to pay more in fees, because we only see one asset on your records, namely ownership of this John Doe Enterprises by your IRA. What John Doe Enterprises does with its money after formation, we don't really see, we don't really have to report on. And that way you can cut what would have been roughly $1,000 or $900 a year in fees down to just one $300 fee for the one holding. Now, when we kind of look at that in terms of note purchases, this means that you could hold, if you wanted to, 3, 4, 5 distressed notes under that LLC and still only have to pay the $295 per year fee. The other advantage to the LLC is the fact that it's called a checkbook IRA because you will have an LLC checking account set up at your local bank, and they'll probably give you a checkbook, a debit card, and you actually write the checks at the time you want to make the note purchase, or if you have to make a deposit, or if you're doing any servicing on the note, you can write those checks yourselves instead of having us do that. So you save time, you save money. There are, however, some cons to have to consider. So basically, reasons people like to set up these checkbook LLCs is that, yes, they save on IRA administrative fees. They have the convenience, it's faster access to their capital. They want to make investments or pay for expenses. And arguably, they have an additional layer of asset protection. You would want to talk to an asset protection attorney about this. IRA accounts, retirement accounts are protected by federal law. They may or may not be as protected by state law. So if you set up an LLC that's owned by your IRA, you could, in many cases, be putting an additional layer of asset protection around your IRA balances there, so that they may not be as easily fall prey to lawsuits or what have you. Disadvantages, the cost to establish and maintain the LLC, that would have to come out of your pocket. Typically, clients tell us it costs about $1,000 to set up one of these LLCs if they use an attorney to do it. You have to do all the record keeping yourself. This means getting QuickBooks or what have you to keep track of money going in and out of that LLC in case the IRS audits you. You certainly want to be able to show that all the money that went in and out of that account was for business purposes and that you didn't do any self-dealing, which, as we saw earlier, would be a prohibited transaction. And therefore, because you're doing that record keeping, there is arguably a greater possibility that you might inadvertently engage in a prohibited transaction. Again, if you're working in partnership with a good CPA or good attorney, they're going to provide you with the instructions and guidance needed to hopefully minimize the possibility that you might engage in a prohibited transaction. So, talking about a lot here, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. And this, this would be do you get many requests, or have you been involved with setting trusts up for IRAs, self-directed IRAs?
Okay, well, let's see. We don't set up the trust. Typically, how?
Well, there
like a specific example of how you were thinking about setting up the trust.
Actually, the question that I had that I was going to ask you, and I'll ask 10 people, and sometimes get different answers. Can you be the trustee? So the custodian would be you. The I have a form here. It's actually Jack Shea's form, who is he's still around, and that's really, I guess I would say, if you want to call it, he's not a lawyer, but if that would be his niche, would be setting up trust for people. Of course, you can go get your EIN and tax ID number just online, super quick. It's about your trustee. Like, can you be your own trustee in your IRA? The way that it was explained to me from him, you would be the custodian, and the beneficiary would be my IRA, and I would name it, instead of having for benefit of Ryan James Barnett, in case someone found out who the heck owns my mortgage, who's Ryan Barnett, just in case, I could name it Memphis, Tennessee Mortgage Trust. But do you know my trustee? Can it be Ryan Barnett? Or I was told that it has to be someone that doesn't have my last name, like it can't be my wife, can't be my mother, kind of like exempt people in the example in the beginning of the, even though it seems to be not related, it could be. Are you familiar? Do you know anything different? Can I be my own trustee of my IRA?
Right. So, the short answer is it's not going to work out for an IRA. But okay, if you have a solo 401k, sometimes people get confused about this. You can have a self-directed individual or solo 401k plan where you have yourself. There's three roles in a 401k. There's the employer, the employee, and a trustee. So you can be trustee of your 401k plan. But in the IRA world, The if you try to set it up that way, you're highly likely to engage in a prohibited transaction.
Okay. Gotcha.
Just because of the way these trustee documents are sometimes put together. I'm just hemming and hawing a little bit here because I don't want to get into a situation where I'm squabbling with somebody about legal advice.
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine. You answered my question perfectly fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, people also will have, now what people will do is they will establish a trust as a beneficiary of their IRA, which is, again, I don't think this is really where you were headed with that. But being your own trustee of an IRA account is essentially if you're asking from the standpoint of, are you able to provide your own custodial services?
No.
The answer is no. So the answer is, the answer, it shouldn't be a strict no. The answer is, it would be so difficult to set that up with the IRS that you wouldn't want to.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. So with getting back to the LLC structure, typically what you do is to set up an IRA LLC, you register with the state of your choice, obtain a certificate of formation, you get a federal tax ID number, and then you develop this operating agreement. Now, most operating agreements for an LLC are what's known as a member managed LLC, because what they assume is that Ryan Barnett is going to be the member, the shareholder in the LLC, and Ryan Barnett is going to be the manager of the LLC. So they'll just call it member managed LLC, and it has verbiage around that. That type of operating agreement does not work with a checkbook IRA, because keep in mind your IRA account is the member, and you stipulate yourself as a non-compensated manager of that LLC. So you want to obtain an attorney opinion letter that the LLC has been structured and is suitable for IRA ownership. And with those 4 items, you can go to the local bank with the operating agreement that we have executed on behalf of the IRA, and you can open up a bank checking account, you can get a bank debit card, stay away from getting a bank credit card, because in almost all cases, a newly formed LLC is not going to have a credit history, and what the bank is going to do is, they'll extend you credit, but only if you personally guarantee that you'll pay that money back, and that is a prohibited transaction under the lending and extension of credit prohibition, which is item B on that list of things you can't do that was there previously. And if you're watching this webinar, if you need to, you can pause here, go back and look at those prohibited transaction rules, and you'll see that you're not ever able to co-sign that you will pay back credit that has been established for an entity owned by your IRA account. So in private lending, what you want to do, let's step back here a little bit, going all the way back to your introduction, Ryan, you were talking about how you need a bank, they can loan, they can provide notes, distress notes. If you're doing a simple promissory note, that can be either a secured or an unsecured note. Basically, all you have to do is provide the custodian with the original note. As what we call the wet ink signature. This means no e-signing, you've got to see the original signature of the borrower on that thing. We'll co-sign the note as the lender on behalf of your IRA, and we'll hold that note until it's been paid off. The terms of that note, whether it's a balloon payment, monthly payments, quarterly payments, principal and interest, however you want to structure that, it's fine, as long as you're charging interest at more or less prevailing rates. If you're not charging interest at prevailing rates, it could look like there's some personal dealing here that's going on, and the IRS might question you. Why are you loaning money at 1% when the prevailing rate is 7 or 8%? As long as you can answer that there's a good business reason for having done so, you'll probably be all right, but it's pretty hard for me to think of one. Keeping in mind your fiduciary responsibility to invest your IRA in a fashion that will allow it to appreciate in value, so that you've got that money there when you want to retire. And charging interest at 1% ain't going to get you there as fast as charging interest at 7 or 8% or higher. Buying distressed notes. As I said earlier, this is often done through an IRA LLC structure due to the time requirement. If you want to buy the note in the name of your IRA account, you have to submit a form to us and say, hey, buy this note. Oftentimes that can be cumbersome. For the LLC structure, it can work out pretty well. Keep in mind that once you get a note, let's say you get a non-performing note, and you have intentions or hopefully you're going to renegotiate something, turn it into a performing note. Strictly speaking, you are going to be the note servicer. From the standpoint of it's going to be up to you to keep track of the note borrower's payment history. They will be writing a check to New Direction IRA. They will be sending that check to us, and you will have online access to your account to see that these checks are coming in on a timely basis. But if the checks don't come in, we're not really going to say anything, and we're not going to let you know. So from that standpoint, you're the servicer in terms of making sure that that note is being paid, monitoring the payment, and taking any action if the note becomes non-performing again. So like a lot of things, you want to be prepared for the possibility of having to foreclose on the property. You can do that. The IRA can hold title, but you'd want to work with your custodian about what's that going to really mean in the event it does happen, and just need to be prepared for the ramifications if you end up being a property holder instead of just a note holder. So a lot of people will get started in notes through a private equity fund. So these are generally structured as a limited partnership or limited liability company. Forming one of these, if you want to form one on your own, could be subject to SEC regulations. You probably want to file an exemption under one of the various regulations, typically Regulation D. There's other regulations that you can talk to your attorney about. But the nice thing about if you're forming it, then you can get people to invest, and they can invest in that LLC as long as they're not disqualified. They can invest with their IRA or with their taxable money as they see fit. But one of the things that a lot of people are doing, if they're thinking about getting started in notes, they will actually invest in somebody else's LP or LLC. So if Ryan, if you were in a situation where you were looking for investors to set up a limited partnership that was going to be purchasing these notes, you could certainly do that. And under those circumstances, the IRA investor doesn't really have to worry about servicing the note or what happens if the note doesn't perform, or are they going to sell the note, or dealing with all of that. They simply allow the general partner to manage that and get some return off of their equity position in this LP or LLC that's been formed. We see that a lot when people are getting started in things. So rather than diving right in, they kind of get their toe wet by maybe investing in somebody else's business that will purchase notes.
Yeah.
And then learn from that person.
Absolutely.
The ins and outs, so that they don't come in as a newbie and make a bunch of mistakes and end up getting burnt.
Yeah, it's as we go back to, I tell you, you hate to always say it, but you have to, and not giving investment advice, just giving advice as a fellow human being. You don't want to. I'm under this rule anyway. I was the one that if I let you borrow a tape CD, I made a copy of it and brought it back the next day. I didn't keep it, forget it was yours. And when you asked for it back 10 times, it came back all scratched up and everything else. Yeah, you don't want to play with your mom's IRA money to see if note investing is the right thing for you to do or not. It is a business. It was in my own twisted mind, and I guess it is more passive than real estate, which you're almost in the real estate business in a different sense. People, there's all sorts of outcomes that can come about the note. You can end up with the property. So a lot of veterans say, don't buy a note on a house that you wouldn't want to own because you may end up owning it. And people get into note business as a way of, it won't work out every time, but as a cheaper way to get the real estate, and they want to keep it as a cash flow rental and rehab it. So there's just so many different ways with notes that you can go about doing it. But yeah, definitely don't go out. Everyone's JVing, JV. So you really want to vet that person, and you're almost in business together. You need to know them and know who you're doing business with, and like them, and make sure y'all communicate and talk. They definitely won't be able to do work and talk to you every day about it, but you want to have an open line of communication, and really from someone who learns. I would just ask. It's a small community. Ask, get to meet people, on Facebook groups, and ask, hey, who did you start out with working with, JVing? Who have you JV'd with before? And how did the process go? Did they teach you? Some, want to be total hands off. Some want to learn it and then do it themselves. So ask. Yeah, you won't get the answer until you ask. So always ask.
Yeah, and yes, and I again certainly don't want to recommend any specific investment, but in general, you're going to have to do your own due diligence regardless
Absolutely.
of what it is you're investing in. So whether or not you're doing a background check and due diligence on an individual that's offering a partnership agreement that will invest in notes,
200% returns, guaranteed. No.
Well, or just looking at the note that you want to purchase and trying to figure out what that property is worth if you take it over. The tenants or the current note holders' credit worthiness, payment history. You're going to have to do your due diligence one way or the other. It's just a question of how passive do you want to be as an investor. People are fond of saying that real estate is a passive investment. Depends on the real estate, depends on how you participate. It can be a very active investment if you're messing around and doing a dozen fix and flips in a year. I would submit that that's almost a full-time job.
Absolutely, and I'm
same way. You can either invest in somebody that does fix and flips, or you can invest in the fix and flips directly. Sure, is
do both.
Potential for a higher return greater if you do the fix and flip yourself? Sure it is, but the risk is higher as well, and the work is higher. So it just kind of comes down to that whole risk-reward trade-off.
Well said.
How much work do you want to do for the return you're going to get? We all want 50% returns without any work.
Yeah, exactly. This is America.
Yeah, that's right. That's what makes us so great.
No taxes. No.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up a little bit here. We'll get into things that you don't know. This is really phrased as a couple of questions. Things that most people don't think about, and you might want to talk to your custodian about. Again, the custodian can't give you advice about how you should deal with these issues, but the good custodian can certainly tell you what the implications are of any of these things happening. So what happens? You've got your IRA invested in notes. You get hit by a bus. Your beneficiaries inherit the IRA. The IRA owns a bunch of notes that may or may not be performing. Are they capable of handling that? Have you sat down and talked with them about it, or are you just making a private investment thinking that it's going to pay off and everything's rosy and nobody will have to worry about it? We touched on the second point a little bit earlier. What happens if somebody defaults on the note? Are you in a position to take legal action? Make sure that if you are taking any kind of legal action, or if you're taking over the property, you're doing foreclosing, you have to make sure that your custodian is signing off on all of those documents instead of yourself personally, because again, it's your IRA that owns the note, not you personally. So that can be a pain in terms of unwinding all of that, and something that you want to just give some thought to. And again, I'd encourage you to talk to your custodian about some of these things if you're at all concerned about it happens. Someone files a lawsuit. That can happen. Are you prepared for that? So this falls under all of the things we've talked about. In this last, my God, we've probably spent an hour on this by now, Ryan. But in the last hour, we've talked an awful lot about the mechanics of what you can do, how to get it done. But there are certain things that a lot of people don't really stop and think about that are worth thinking about before you jump in with your IRA.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so that's it, Ryan.
Yeah, well, what's your contact information there, Alan? I did put it over there, and I will put it below. But yeah, absolutely. Just for anyone that has questions or that will have questions, to reach out to you. I will be, as I have reached out to you, in setting up. So, do you have any, where I would like to create some or co-create some to where, so say this investor or this person, okay, say my mother has be it a 401k, a Roth IRA, an IRA, what can be put into a self-directed IRA and what can't? Say she works for corporate America with a 401k, can she create that into a self-directed IRA? Basically, like, a PDF of what can't be done, not necessarily rules, but really, I guess I would say rules on certain IRAs. Like, maybe if someone works at FedEx, can they do their IRA in a self-directed IRA? Like, will the corporation allow them to do it?
And you just hit on the key answer. So when you're looking at a retirement plan, a 401k, a 403b, 457, any of these types of various plans for teachers, government workers, private industry workers, you work at FedEx, you have a 401k, they will have an overarching 401k plan document that they can customize for their own particular interests.
Mm-hmm.
The answer if the 401k is with a current employer, the answer is you might be able to get some of that money over into an IRA. If the 401k is with a former employer, that's a no-brainer. That's easy. You can roll over an old 401k from a former employer into an IRA account.
Gotcha.
So if you wanted to check to see if your 401k with your current employer, if you could move a portion of that into an IRA, the thing to do is get a hold of the plan administrator, Fidelity, Vanguard, whomever, and the thing to ask for is, am I able to take what is known as an in-service distribution? It's a distribution of your 401k while you're still an employee of the company. What you need to do is understand that if the answer to that is yes, the money that you take out will be considered a distribution and would be taxable unless you redeposit that into an IRA account within 60 days of taking the distribution. So that's the way people can sometimes get money out of their current employer 401k into an IRA, is to take an in-service distribution and deposit that into another IRA account within that 60-day time frame.
And then they wouldn't be taxed for that?
They would not be taxed.
That's the thing. And see, that's going to change your ROI calculator, note investors. So, you don't want to just start out learning, I JV, never JV'd, never done a note deal, and use this guy's 401k that you didn't know in 60 days and you couldn't find any notes. So in 65 days, you found a note and bought it. everything's going great, great. And in the end, you know, when you do a 50-50 split or whatever deal you worked out with in the business arrangement, JV arrangement, oh my God, you know, the RI was this, but then after tax,
Yeah.
bam, it's this. You know, what a reputation to carry.
Yeah.
So you really need to know your stuff. And constantly, I'm taking notes during this, even though I'll have a recording of this. It sinks in when I watch, see, write. So yeah, it's everything you gotta look into. And I imagine if you would just have to ask your employer. I imagine if you're an executive and they go in and buy, match you dollar for dollar in stock purchases, you know, I imagine their answer will be a little different than, you know, a middle manager that doesn't have that same arrangement. You know, if they can roll over a portion of it into a self-directed IRA. So
Right.
you could see
Right.
where it could go either
Yes.
way.
There's lots of nuances to that because, and you raise a good point, because if you contact Fidelity or Vanguard, whoever does the plan, you know, whoever sends you out the statement for your 401k,
Yeah.
if you say, am I eligible for an in-service distribution, they're going to see that on the computer screen and they'll say yes or no. If they say yes, then the next question is, how much can I take out? And they will tell you what that amount is, because that could be subject to all kinds of rules. It may be that you're able to take out the money that you contributed, but not the employer's contribution.
Gotcha.
So, you know, they have to sit there and look at how much of that 401k did Ryan contribute to from his paycheck? How much did the employer contribute? What's been the growth? How much of that growth is attributable to Ryan versus the company's contribution?
Yeah.
Even let him have any of his growth, or is it just going to be the amount of money that really came out of his paycheck? So it gets complicated really fast. Fortunately, the answer to that question can be pretty easily obtained just by asking two questions to the rep that answers the phone when you have a question about your 401k.
Which is in-service distribution and
if so, how much?
Gotcha. Absolutely. Oh, well, Alan, I greatly appreciate you I'm glad everything's okay with the family and yourself, and glad we were able to get together. And anyone, if you have any questions, just post below on whatever platform this will be on. Be on a few, YouTube. I'll send out an email to the database, just as original one, to where me and Wesley just did ROI calculators and just to chit chat on notes. But I'll post it, send it out to you. And if you do have any questions, shoot an email back. Here's Alan's information and email, and just post below in YouTube or an email back to either one of us, and we'll gladly answer them. And thank you, Alan, very much. And as things change, as they always do, I'll definitely be in touch with you anyhow. With some of these other rules, like with myself, for instance, I would like to open another Roth IRA where I'm not taxed again when I start withdrawing from it, just with different rules. So from my understanding with the Roths, I can have more than one of those, just can't tap out the $5,500 putting into it per year. And that goes for across the board, correct? Or that's for each Roth, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, since you mentioned it, it's a $5,500 contribution limit as an individual. Now, if you set up a SEP IRA and you made a contribution into a traditional IRA with before tax dollars, there's nothing really preventing you from then taking the money that went into that SEP or on your behalf as a traditional and converting to a Roth and then paying the taxes. So if you did the immediate conversion, it would be like taking your SEP and investing directly into a Roth, except that it's a two-step process. First of all, you put it in on a before tax basis, then you convert it and you shell out the money for the taxes. But since it's all coming pretty much from your own business, it's just which pocket is that tax dollar coming out of, but the net result is the same. You've put in a large amount of money. It's just a question of whether or not you want to pay the taxes on what you put in today, or do you want to pay the taxes down the road in retirement when you start taking it out.
Gotcha. Exactly. I tell you what, yeah, that's what pays to have advisors, tax advisors.
Yes, definitely talk to
IRA advisors,
about how
everything. And it can get boring. I think embrace the boring. I don't know if that was an Einstein or Andrew Carnegie quote or not, but embrace the boring. If it is boring, because some stuff is and can be like a number of laws, any laws reading, it's like, oh gosh. But if you can hammer it in and get past, and you get to a certain level, then of knowledge, then it's almost like muscle memory, muscle exercising. It'll pay off in dividends for you for sure. If but yeah, you can't know everything. As in Alan, you could ask him a question and you have to go research. It's almost like a CPA. It's like, well, heck, I don't know. I'll find out because they just enacted a new law yesterday, and that could affect us next year on our taxes. So, and that's really what IRAs are. It's pre-planning for later on when you start withdrawing, and if it's for you or for beneficiaries that if you have any kids or family, and that is a whole nother discussion for if you are so blessed to be able to create generational wealth where you can't or don't want to spend all of it on whatever the gadgets may be that you want to buy, but to keep it for grandkids college, or your kids, not to just spoil them like, here's the money, and didn't teach you anything on how to do it or what to do with it, but here you go, and ruin their life. But just that's what it's for. It's just pre-planning. And I'll stop rambling on. Alan, greatly appreciate talking to you, and love to get together again. We will get together again, but get together again live as stuff changes, even if it's a tiny little change, or just reiterate the conversation, and have Wesley with Remedy Assets on with us again next time, because when you put another mind in it, then another question pops up and the dynamics totally change, and the conversation goes a totally different way.
Yeah, and I think we do have webinars that we repeat over and over and over again, even though they're recorded and people can go out and watch them. There's just something about a live presentation where people will sit there and go, I can get that question answered like when I think of it, as opposed to having to remember to write it down and send it to somebody.
Yeah.
So there's always room for live webinars, even if it's a bit repetitive.
Absolutely. Always.
Anyway, I appreciated the opportunity. I'm glad for that we were able to put this together and get it to work, and look forward to doing more in the future with you.
Absolutely, Alan. Have a great evening and good rest of your weekend.
You too.
Good to see you. Thanks, Alan.
Okay. Yeah. Bye now.
Bye, everybody.